request everyone to have a moment of silence to reflect on our duties as council members and to also pray for the safety and safe return of our soldiers both overseas and in the United States. Thank you. The first item is public comment, and I don't believe anyone signed up, did they? Okay, so we have no public comment, and we have no response, therefore. So next, it's Bob, town manager.
Thank you. The first item I'd like to do, as I've done at the past council meetings, is to update you on several open positions that are currently out there. First is the library director position. I've worked with Sharon Bellenoit and the library trustees to update the job description and bring it in line with our new town form of government, as well as get the job description posted. And Sharon made a point to increase the breadth of the postings that job description is getting out on right now. So it's going out to the American Library Association, Mass Board of Library Trustees, Mass Municipal Association, Simmons College that has a strong library program, and a number of other locations. So we want to try to cast as broad of a net as we can. The deadline for responses at this point is 9:30. We have received one response to date, and it's relatively quick because the posting just went out a couple of days ago. So we're optimistic that we'll see some good quality applicants for that position. These other items are items that you will likely be seeing in the next couple of meetings, a request for hiring. One is a full-time library assistant. Library had a resignation from one of their staff members over the past week or two, and as a result of that, there's an opening within the library. We will have an opening, or we do have an opening posted at the DPW for a skilled worker, which is the entry-level position. That position is being created as a result of promotions within the department. As staff have moved up to fill a vacant position, we now have an entry-level position that is posted. Carolyn Brennan has a transportation coordinator, which I believe she will be asking the council to approve at its next meeting. She has posted that twice. The first time she did not have any strong candidates, so she didn't take that forward. The second time, she has received one candidate that she believes is very strong and just got that information to me today. So I thought it was premature to bring it in front of the council, but I expect she'll bring it in front of the council at the next council meeting and be looking for authorization to hire that individual. The last item I have is the police department. We've mentioned previously that there are 4 entry-level positions open. Talking with Chief DeLesio, he has 9 candidates off the civil service list that he's considering. He's doing background review right now. He expects that at the next council hearing that he'll have 4 names to put forward at that point. And then after that, all 4 would then need to go to the academy this fall.
Does he anticipate, excuse me, does he anticipate being able to get him into the academy this fall?
He does. I believe he has a deadline of October 15th
oh, okay,
or 17th to apply, but
so we'll be in that window of opportunity. Good.
Subject to all the positions being filled up, but at this point he's optimistic that he can get them all in this fall.
Okay.
The next item is really just to notes, information that the council's already aware of and the public is aware of as well. We did lift the voluntary water use restrictions on July 30th. They were very successful. We had them posted for 5 days, primarily because we saw really unprecedented demand in the prior 2 or 3 weeks to that period. Our residents did cut back significantly in their water usage for 5 days, and that allowed the system to get back to where it needed to be. And based on what I've been seeing for the past couple of weeks, I don't anticipate the need to repeat voluntary restrictions, even though we're going to be seeing some high temperatures and dry weather continued in the foreseeable future. So it did the trick, and keep our fingers crossed we won't have to make that request again. The next item I had was a petition that was brought forward by Councilor Federici from residents of Hanwood Hill. I received that about 2 weeks, about a week and a half or so ago. The concern of the residents on Hanwood Hill is primarily related to parking during elections, but also parking during athletic events. What I did when I received this petition was I reached out to the individual who had put the petition together, a Mrs. Shea, let her know that what my game plan was to get the impacted department heads together, which would be the school department, the town clerk relative to elections, and the police department, and discuss a plan for trying to reduce the impact of the residents if we could. And in talking with the town clerk already, he advised me that one of the items that the residents were looking for, which was relocation of elections back to the high school, is something that he had been considering for the annual elections next year.
For next year, next June for the council elections.
Right.
I don't want to move the big election November 8th, just because we've had them there for, 12 years now. And I think after the big one, school will not be in session on
Right.
November 8th, so that'll really help.
Sure.
Yeah, but after that, the high school is now ADA compliant with its doors, its ramps, which it wasn't up until a few years ago. So now we can move it there, and it makes sense because the parking is much better. So that's the long-term plan for that.
So our plan at this point, and what I indicated to Mrs. Shea, is that we'll be getting together tomorrow, meeting again with the town clerk, school department, and police department, and try to address as many of their concerns in as short of a time period as possible. If we're not able to relocate the elections for the fall election, we would minimally most likely be looking at posting no temporary, no parking signs along the street, which I think will go a long way towards addressing their concerns. There may be some items, one item they were looking forward to was considering relocating the start of the parade to Hanwood Hill. Again, we haven't had the internal meeting yet, but I suspect I'm going to hear that there are some difficulties due to the width of Hanwood Hill Road and things like that that might make that difficult to do. But I'm optimistic we'll get most of the way there. The next item I had was the former rail property cleanup, and that's an item that the council president and myself worked on together. He had been contacted by residents who use that property. It's not town-owned property, and this is property in between Westwood Avenue and North Main Street. It's the former rail property that residents think that the town owned, but the town does not actually own it, and they use it as a continuation of the town rail trail. There was concern regarding dumping along that property. Again, in working with the council president, we reached out to Buckeye Pipeline, who is the entity that owns the gas pipeline that runs along that rail right-of-way, including our piece of the right-of-way as well, and asked them. One of the issues is that when they did their clearing last year, they opened up that area much more than it had been to vehicle traffic. So we reached out and asked them if they were willing to participate in putting some barricades up at the two ends of the street on Westwood and actually behind the Stop and Shop on North Main Street. They were very willing to do so. They were also very willing to send their crews in there this week and clean up the debris that had been dumped along the private property. So I think it was a win-win solution. It was a solution that addressed the concerns of the residents on a piece of property that they use, although it's not town-owned property. It addressed it at no cost to the town and no cost to the private property owner as well. The next item I have is something that I think Vice President Federici is probably aware of. When the governor took over 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, one of the things that he did shortly after taking office was create something known as the Massachusetts Community Compact. And what the Mass Community Compact was about was identifying what the governor's office felt were best practices and then incentivizing communities to put those best practices in place. The way that the governor's office intended to incentivize those best practices was, one, to provide funding to help implement those best practices, and also for communities that had received the community compact designation, they might potentially be eligible for additional points on other competitive grant type programs in the Commonwealth. So it was really a carrot that the governor's office was hanging out there to get communities focused on what the governor's office felt to be some of the better practices that they should be utilizing. The 7 areas of best practices are education, energy and the environment, financial management, housing and economic development, IT, regional shared services, transportation, and citizen safety. The former interim town administrator took some steps pretty much on his own to start the community compact process. And it left us in a situation where we really didn't know where we stood. We didn't really know what he had submitted for best practices. We didn't know what our status was with the state. So one of the first things I did was to reach out through through Senator Lesser's office to try to get the attention of the governor's office to have them basically provide back to us what our status was and what we had indicated would be our best practices. And I did provide the council with a copy of what I received back from the governor's office. What we had identified at that time were 3 best practices. And I think at least 2 of them, in doing some initial discussions with department heads, everybody is in agreement, make a lot of sense. One is, development of an HR position, which we're all in agreement with and clearly is something that the town is looking to do in the near term. The other item was more financial transparency, which again, through the IT department, we've made a lot of improvements in that area. You can now, for instance, look up salaries of all town employees. You can take a look at expended budgets of all town departments, and that's all available online. So the governor's office is looking for communities to focus more and more in getting the information out to the residents and making it available. The third item that had been put out there was developing not a tracking system, but really a marking and tagging system for town fixed assets and real assets, whether it's equipment, whether it's property. I think the feeling right now is that's something we should be working towards, but may not be something that is a near-term goal, and that there may be better near-term goals that we could identify. So we're sitting down with department heads tomorrow. We're putting the whole list of best practices in front of them, and I'll be looking for suggestions that ultimately to pass on to Mrs. Bernard in terms of where the town might want to go in terms of identifying an additional best practice. To qualify for the program, we only have to identify 2 best practices off the governor's list, so we're already there, but most communities have gone beyond just 2 and identified a couple more. The other thing that's worth noting is that there's now 250 communities in Massachusetts out of 351 that have signed the community compact. So most communities, majority of communities have already signed up for this program, so we're now in the minority and need to work to get in with that group.
Bob, a comment on that?
Excuse me?
A comment on that?
So,
In regards to the one item that you think might be questionable, I would only ask that you consider the audit paperwork that we get every year. Repeatedly, we get the same comments for a lack of a capital asset management program or a capital asset inventory, which is of course required by state law, and we don't have. So from that standpoint, I think working toward that end through this program would serve many purposes. One, on our audit and accounting and accountability of the town's assets, and with the state in there. So I would think before you eliminate it, I would think in terms of
Sure.
It's something that occurs and reoccurs nearly with every audit and has yet to be addressed by the town.
I did have a discussion with the town accountant, and she was actually in agreement that the actual tagging system may not be the highest priority. Before she went on leave, she reached out to all town departments to start developing the asset list that actually by town bylaw we should have always had. And I believe most departments are pretty well along in developing that overall list. So putting that list together, keeping that list current, absolutely. Putting barcodes on tables and things like that.
Yeah.
That was sort of the focus of the best practice that was identified.
Okay.
There may be a better, higher priority best practice that we could pick off that list that might, achieve more benefit in the short term. Yeah, but we've already made great strides, and with the, pushing of the town accountant to get there.
Capital asset, good, thank you.
So again, that'll be an item that I'll get going, and then I'll be handing it over to Mrs. Menard, presumably, to be taking it to the next step. Right now, what happened because of the state of the government being in flux, the governor's office basically put our application on hold. So although our application was submitted, it was not recognized as final, and thus we will actually be part of the fiscal 17 program. and not considered part of the 16 program. But we're in there, we're in the queue. We just need to update and tweak what we've submitted if we ultimately decide that we want to do that.
So amendments to the application won't set us back in terms of our placement. It doesn't pull us out of the queue, and then, so we can change on the fly.
That's right, and they put that in writing via email that, you know, they're open. They recognize we're at a unique time and that what they received may or may not have been supported by the whole community, and that's what they really want to make certain that these are best practices that the town can support and isn't just an individual, you know, preference of one person. Moving through the agenda, the next item, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this, but I did want to make the council aware, if folks have walked along the bike path heading south from Maple Street, the actual address is 64 Maple Court. There's a large pile of wood and logs, and there have been wood chips and other wood material over there that continues to grow. It's an area that a number of town departments have been concerned about at that property for some time. It's also a location that OSHA has stepped in and issued a citation not to the property owner, but to the operator of the property. Fire department has identified fire safety concerns at that location. The planning board has identified that there's a lack of a business permit and actually lack of either a waiver of site plan or site plan approval for that occupation, or that use of the site, and the health department has looked at it and has some public health concerns as well, given the proximity of those logs to the rail trail. We have attempted to work with the operator of the property. Thus far hasn't been successful. We expect we'll be getting the property owner's attention. At some point we may be talking about this, and you know, if our attempts are not successful going at it from an enforcement standpoint, you know, we may have to go beyond that, and at that point we'll probably talk in a closed session about what our options might be available.
Not to get too far off track, but you know, Maple Court, it's become a really dangerous street. The speed of which and the amount of traffic that road was not designed for that, and at some point we should probably, you know, have a conversation, not to get too far off topic, but that has become a dangerous street.
Maple Court's interesting in that there's an 18-foot right-of-way there. It's essentially, you know, I'm presuming was intended more or less as a driveway at one point, and is used by the public as the same as a street.
As a cut-through.
As a cut-through, absolutely.
And it really can't accommodate two-way traffic, you know, so it's becoming problematic that at some point we should talk about that.
So
My office is across the street from you. You haven't lived till you've seen a semi try to make that corner.
Believe me, I've seen it.
That's true. You're even closer.
So, you know, our hands may be tied in terms of making geometric improvements because we really don't own very much property there, but one-way traffic, other types of things might be something that we need to consider.
And there was talk years ago, recently, of one particular developer trying to buy that whole piece and develop it into a project, so maybe that could be all part and parcel of their site plan, if that ever comes to fruition. But my understanding is that the aforementioned owner of the log place was perhaps not party to that agreement, so maybe we'll see how that plays out. Is the operator and the owner the same person or different?
No, it's not.
people? Okay.
The latest notice that went out, because from a public health standpoint, both the property owner and the operator were involved, so they were both notified. And again, we'll see how that all plays out.
I may be wrong, but I don't believe the vehicles stored there are something that should be on that property either.
I'm not going to comment. It would not. There are lots of issues with that property.
Right.
Yes.
Well, the good news is you can't see the vehicles anymore because of the piles of logs.
This is true, yeah.
Right.
Is the old railway station, is that on his property? Or is it on our property? What's the status of that?
That's actually owned by a private party, and it's on the owner of the property's property.
Okay, that's not the same person?
No.
All right.
The property owner is the same, but the operator is not.
No, but we're talking about the rail, the old.
The building, the
The
old
old
train
depot
station,
building?
depot building.
The depot's owned by a different person that owns the property.
Okay.
I'm just curious if that was, you know, part of the whole thing, but apparently it is on that person's property as well.
Right. Our issue really right now is the safety issues that are out there, and you know, obviously OSHA has identified, and OSHA will only address worker safety, so the issues that they called attention to were really only issues that existed on the property itself with workers on the property, not anybody walking adjacent property or nearby the property.
What's the recency of the OSHA complaint
May 26th.
of this year?
Yeah. The next item I will start off with, and if you have questions, I'd defer the questions to the town clerk. Town clerk, and I have to give him credit for this year, took a little bit different approach than what we've done in the past relative to properties that owe the town taxes, and particularly properties that have either had payment plans in place and have defaulted on those payment plans, so it's not someone that, you know, is in arrears for a relatively short amount of time. Typically somebody who's been in arrears for a long period of time. The town has worked to try to work with property owners, and for whatever reason that hasn't worked out. Or property owners that are completely non-responsive to efforts by the collector's office to try to collect back taxes. The approach that town clerk has taken is to basically sell the tax liens, not the property, but the tax liens to a private party, and that's done, again, Tom can talk about this, quite common in most municipalities in the Commonwealth. And what that does is that results in an immediate infusion of funds to the town. Instead of having to spend money trying to collect money and potentially having to take property and sell property at some point in the future, it results in an immediate receipt of taxes that are due, and in some cases more than the taxes are due, because the tax liens may in fact be worth more than the value of the outstanding tax. Results in again, faster payment. It also results in some benefits to the property owners in that the interest rate that applies is a lower interest rate than if the town had to go through the full tax title collection process. So there's some benefits to all parties, and it's a process that is resulting, I believe, in a recipient of about $527,000 of outstanding taxes that'll go back into the town's coffers. So, if any specific questions, Tom can certainly pick them up.
Just for the townspeople, how many properties were included?
There was 15.
15?
So, 15 that you work on, you call, you try to get in communication with, and for those who don't want to get back to you, they're not on payment plans. So 15 out of approximately 5,700 parcels, residential parcels, it's a real small number, but however, that's always normally the toughest part to collect, on the bottom part like that. But the week leading up to also are the other ones who were on that list. I mentioned Bob. Good job explaining that. They came in to pay because they didn't want to go through the third party. They wanted to get on a payment plan. And again, the Department of Revenue allows us to put 25% down, or the resident 25% down, and spread the payments out between 6 and 12 months. So we did take in close to $800,000 for that week, which is the Town Accounting Appropriation Committee had a great point that really attacks the receivables number real well. That money coming in just goes toward that outstanding number. So, and a lot of cities, towns do it, and it's a win-win for both sides.
Now, this is an auction, and it's held at the town hall.
Yeah. And
entities have to register for this auction.
Exactly.
Typically, how many people registered for this, or entities registered for the auction?
Well, there's as many people as they want could register.
True.
Again, but bundled up in one unit. There's certain few could actually afford to
come up with the money.
Register to come up with the money.
And they'd have to come up with the money right then and there, or they had a certain period of time post-auction to write the check?
No, it had to be right.
So they'd have good funds right there?
Right.
Okay.
I have a question as well. The taxes that continue to accrue on those properties, are those taxes due to town or that other entity? Are they going to be due to Talent, if you will?
Yeah, it's the taxes that are passed to, the current taxes that are due, will stay with the town. The ones that were any taxes passed due, we got the money for.
Right, I'm talking about going forward from that cutoff date when those taxes were cleaned up.
Yeah.
They continue to accrue for those property owners.
Right.
Who will participate in the collection process of that?
Right, on a yearly basis, we can do this again next year. And if the same properties have not paid again, then we'll do the same thing. Reach out to them and they'll give us the money for that.
So,
Thank you.
Sorry, just a follow-up question to that. So an example of that would be, you know, a tax lien was due, you sold off that debt, we got paid on that.
Right.
So from today forward, now you accrue new taxes.
Mhm.
What happens if that property owner defaults? The person who paid, you know, the debt off now becomes the property owner and then has to pay the rest of the taxes to us to own the property?
No, but they go through tallage, if I'm understanding you correctly.
So if the person doesn't, you know, continues to default on the tax liens, those liens have been sold to this third party.
Right.
So do they eventually become the property owner if they continue to default on the loan?
If they cannot to default, yeah, these people are real estate attorneys, tax title attorneys, and they can foreclose, they can continue that process 6 months to a year from now if these people still haven't paid.
Which would involve housing court and land court.
Right.
And then in the meantime, so another, say, 6 months of back taxes accrue.
Right.
Who's responsible for that 6 months or the next
homeowner,
year?
The property owner, but those accrue against the town, and then the town would have to engage in the same process again to collect them
Gotcha.
after a given amount of time goes by.
Right.
And I'm guessing that the original amount of time that was set before you went after these people, when you gave them the, you know, time to pay up,
Yeah,
was
but-
approximately 3 years.
Well, you can't go more than 3 years, you never want to get close to that, but probably a year and a half to no more than 2 years. And, you know, which, I mean, unfortunately, everybody's situation is different,
Yeah.
but that's the law, and you just, you know, you have to,
Well, if that entity
protect
is
the town.
successful in housing court and land court, then the taxes that are continuing to accrue right now will be paid by that agency to the town when there's a transfer of that
Right.
deed, I would hope.
Tom, some of these, I know we had looked into this in the Appropriations Committee, and some of these were quite old, had kind of lingered for quite some time. What
Yeah.
policies are we putting in place to prevent that in the future from some of these lingering for so many years?
Yeah, okay, good question. A couple of things we've done is some of these people were on a payment plan, and again, you try to work with them, they pay, and then it's right there in the payment plan. If you default on it, if you don't keep up with your agreement, you know, then we're subject to do something like this. So some people just defaulted on it, and you send letters out, and they, you know, they come in and they do 1 or 2 payments, and then they default again, and then, you know, so.
Is the payment plan designed before or after they become in tax title?
Well, again, it's. You
Before
can
the
do-
process has started?
Right, you can do it, it's, usually you do it after tax title.
Okay, so we're arranging payment plans after the process has started?
Right.
Okay.
And we've moved that process up, you know, as best as we can, probably at least 6 months to a year, instead of waiting, you know, maybe 2.5 years, we're trying to get it, send letters out that much quicker. And, you know, again, just having 15 properties, you know, it's good, but those are the ones that take the most time, and, you know, our collection rate is very, very positive, but it's, you know, those are the 2 steps, defaulting on the plans, and then we're moving up, you know, when we do put the lien process in place to address that.
And we picked up interest and penalties on those taxes that accrued over that time period, or?
Yeah.
And what was the rate, our interest rate, is it roughly?
Yeah, it's 14, again, this is all Department of Revenue, individual guideline releases. And they've never changed this, and it's always been kind of high. And Connecticut actually is a little bit higher. If you're late, it's 14%, okay? And then when you do go into tax title, that jumps up to 16%. So your per diem rate can be, you know, a good chunk per day. You know, $2, $4, $5 a day times. you
So
know,
all
30 days.
15 of those delinquent tax bills are now accruing at 16% to tallage?
Right.
Okay.
That's where they make their money.
Yeah, right. But we get our money now, and any legal stuff, if it's a tax title or attorney or whatever we may need, you know, they do it.
So in total then, between what went out to bid and what was prevented from going out to bid by people coming in to pay, what did that mean in terms of dollars to the town
Just shy of $800,000
in total?
in total.
And how much of that went out to bid, do you know? How much of that?
527,000.
527, okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Good job.
thanks.
So that's the last item I had in my reports.
Next item, does anyone have any changes to the minutes of July 26th?
You look at me,
Could you always,
and I do. I don't want to disappoint you.
I served with a select person who was the same way.
Wow, that hurt, Paul. Tom, I do have some
No.
Okay,
amendments for you.
thank you very much.
On the second page, second paragraph under item 5B,
This is the regular,
regular, regular meeting. Like I said, the second paragraph down under 5B, Mr. Anderson discussed how we allocate funds. Mr. Madison stated how the permanent town manager can help allocate funds. The two boards, not who should be paid, but are not paid. I never really said at that point it should be paid, okay?
Thank you very much.
In the next paragraph down, the motion that was made as a result of that conversation, says Mr. Madison made a motion that the 3 Board of Health members should make $2,000 each. The motion actually was that the 3 Board of Health members make $2,000 annually, funded from the selectmen compensation budget.
Okay.
Because we never specified where that $2,000 is coming from in the way you have it written. But the motion did specify where it comes from.
On the motion, and I said again, the 2 paragraphs down, but you're right in that paragraph. You said.
Yeah, it's got to be embodied
Both.
in the motion, though,
Okay.
as
Yeah.
part of the record.
You got it.
Um,
Okay.
And let me see. Pages aren't numbered, so let me look. It's, under the interview
Yep,
with Mrs. Menard.
yep.
So on the first full page of that interview,
Okay.
What page are you on, Eric?
the pages aren't numbered.
what's at the top of the page?
It starts with Mr. Kane believed.
Yeah, I have, yeah, the first full page, you can
Yeah,
get
I'm
me that.
letting them know what, they were trying to figure out what page I'm on.
It's page 6.
Page 6, okay. Says Eric Madison made made a motion to offer the position of interim town manager to Mrs., you have Dennis, it's Denise.
Oh, jeez,
Thank you.
sorry.
I get that a lot.
Also, the motion was to authorize the council president and Councilman Ford to negotiate a compensation and benefit package to be brought back to the full council for final approval, which is on the agenda tonight, but again, it's got to be in the motion.
Okay.
Are those all changes?
That's all of them that I had.
Anyone else have any changes?
I sent him some, I mean, I can summarize it, just a couple minor typo type things. It said, well, I mean, I have it as the 3rd page and 4th paragraph. It starts with Mr. Ford asked a question regarding building trust with a new form of government, and building trust seems like it's an event, like a building trust. And probably building trust should be not capitalized. And then the next page, where it starts at 7:25, it says that he exists and a short recess is taken. It should be,
Exits.
He did exist.
it's true.
Sorry.
He does exist,
Sorry about that.
and then he exited. So he exits.
Yeah.
On the next page, the sentence starting with Mr. Manley then asked about the challenges. Let's go to the paragraph below. It starts with, in being from Connecticut. It just a little disjointed, so I added, Mr. Anderson asked about concerns going to a Massachusetts governmental system from Connecticut. And then it flows better, in being from Connecticut, and then she responds, I know, then it works out. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, yeah,
Annual might out.
annual night out, yes, it
It's
should
an
be
annual
night out,
So.
night out.
So
And that's on item 8D. And I didn't have any other comments at that point. But what are the things that Councilman Madison and myself were talking about was about the minutes, is that maybe we should vote on the minutes after we actually see the final version of the minutes, as opposed to, because a couple weeks ago we had, just a thought, just to throw it out there. I mean, I think at this point, we already disclosed everything, but in the past, it was, I sent you my changes, and I didn't know what the changes were. They were just already incorporated. Maybe if the changes are totally flushed out, then we can vote on it now. But if there are changes that were sent prior that have not been flushed out, then perhaps wait until we see the final version.
So I think tonight they were all flushed out.
I think tonight they were flushed out.
Well, I
And
actually,
this too, they exited.
I tend to agree. Some of the changes that we've had to make involve the motions, and the motions become the official document. That's what the Department of Revenue goes to, the minutes. They don't go to LCAT recordings, they don't go to recordings, they go to the minutes to find out where something is appropriated to and from, and where the money's to come from and everything else, and then, of course, they compare that to the town books and whatnot. So I think the importance of particularly the motions, the body of conversation, you know, we can fight over that all the time, but the motions themselves, I think, have to be accurate, extremely accurate, because they do become the official record of the legislative body of the town of East Long Meadow. So with that in mind, I would prefer to approve the minutes after we've seen the amended minutes.
That's fine. Are there changes to the executive? No.
No,
Okay.
No.
Anyone?
no.
All right. In that case, we'll table the minutes of, the regular minutes of July 26th till we see the final version, and I'll propose a motion to accept the executive session minutes of July 26th.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. Next item, communications, correspondence, and announcements. We have the annual invitation from the fire chief, Paul Morissette. On September 11th every year, our fire department is nice enough and I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but they have the presence to continue to hold a vigil in memory of the events of September 11th, 2001, and the loss of life, including the first responders on that day. So this year it will be at 8 p.m. and it'll last approximately half an hour, and it's outside the fire station, and I've participated in it almost every year since it started. I won't be able to this year, but I'm sure our president, and it's usually the president, or in our case the chairman of the board who was allowed to speak, but I'm sure if anyone wants to speak, they can talk to the chief and make that noted. So it is a wonderful event. It's a solemn event, and once again, we've been invited as a council to take part in this process. Next item is, we get a letter from Alexis, I believe it's Alexis Oliver. She got a Board of Selectmen scholarship, and she said, "Thank you for selecting me for the Board of Selectmen scholarship. I'm very honored to receive this award. This scholarship will definitely be a great help as I pursue my education to become an environmental engineer at North Carolina State University. Thank you again for your generosity." And I don't know if that was a caveat, but it's interesting that the scholarship was provided by Republic Services, which is our waste hauling company, and the money that they give us, and she's taking up an environmental engineering position. So I think that's appropriate. So you can't talk about money well spent. So we wish her well. Old business. Let's see, the first item, which is the interim town manager contract status, we will hold that to executive session. I believe there's two items that will be in executive session today, that and the Chief Mellis's outstanding pay. The next item is the permanent town manager. I know I received, did everyone receive that correspondence from, I'm trying to think of his name.
He said mine bounced back, so, but he did send it to my business email.
Every time I
So
think of
it-
his name, I think of the hot dog eating winner,
Yes,
Kobayashi.
I do
So,
too.
That's
So,
it, Kobayashi.
Yeah, so he sent it back, so it came late this afternoon. I wrote to
Okay.
Ryan to find out if there's some type of, but did you guys all receive it in your?
I received it today, and I haven't had a chance to review
Yeah.
it, so I know he wants our response by a certain amount of time, so I believe we can all review it at our leisure and respond with any potential changes that you feel necessary to him by the date. Do you have anything to add to that, Bob?
No, I don't.
Okay, thanks.
And you've received a copy as well of the prototype for the new town manager, permanent town manager? I mean, they're,
No, I
no,
haven't.
okay. We'll probably
I'm certainly willing to comment
share
on it.
to both of you, just for comments,
Sure.
I would think.
Okay, and as I said, under the appropriations, the Chief Mellis pay will discuss in executive session at the end of the meeting. And under new business, we have two items. Winterberry Lane Street acceptance. We've done these before. I know Bob will be happy to fill in. I'm sure you're all aware. When there's a private way and they meet all the requirements that the town needs to make it a street, if you will, then the town can accept it for tax purposes and for, please feel free to embellish on that, so.
Yeah, the process that's recommended tonight is the same process that would have been taken at town meeting, and now that the town council is the legislative body, it's the town council's purview to accept, if it chooses, town ways. This particular street, Winterberry Lane, was proposed for acceptance at the annual town meeting. It was pulled back at the last minute because there was one additional item that we thought was going to be completed by the town meeting night. It was not completed, so the Board of Public Works that night decided to take it off of the agenda. The Board of Public Works did vote on July 27th of this year because the last punch list item was taken care of to recommend acceptance by the town council, and the planning board had previously voted to recommend acceptance by the town council. So at this point, we're in a position that we would have been at town meeting, recommendations from both the planning board and the Board of Public Works relative to street acceptance. The language of the acceptance, I believe, is in your packet.
Yeah.
It's a relatively short paragraph that then refers to a much longer description.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
Is this a relatively new street?
It was. The construction was just finished this last year, so it is following what I would strongly encourage developers to follow, which is get their streets built, get the project done, get it done correctly, and then get out of there, and then have the town accept it. We have some projects that have lagged for a long time that are unaccepted streets, and that's generally not a good thing for anybody.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Just, there's a bond in place, I take it?
There is a
until-
bond in place, correct.
Okay.
In that case, I move that the town take in fee simple pursuant to the provisions of general laws, Chapter 79, or otherwise acquire as a town way, Winterberry Lane located at the easterly end of Juniper Lane as described on Attachment A, and said way is also shown on a plan on file in the Hampden County Registry of Deeds in Book of Plans 365, page 72, and that no damages be awarded for said taking, as recommended by the Planning Board and Board of Public Works.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Very good. And the last item on here before executive is Ellie Belcher. As you probably are all aware, they're proposing a service station on the corner of Shaker and
Chestnut.
Chestnut, thank you. And this is their application for the license for the provisions of Chapter 148 for a license to store flammables, combustibles, or explosives on land in buildings or structures herein described, and that is the 227 Shaker Road, parcel 1D, 18-3-0. Any questions on this? Because Bob could probably answer.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So where will the entrance points be? Will it be on Shaker?
There'll be two entrance and exit points that were previously approved, actually probably 2 years ago now, and then were reapproved when some minor modifications were made. One entrance is going to be on Shaker Road. It'll be as far to the north on Shaker Road as the developer can accommodate on that property. And then there'll be a second access point on Chestnut, about 2/3 of the way from the intersection towards the bike path. And it was a catch-22. Ideally, you'd like to make that exit point as far away from the intersection as possible to minimize the impact on the intersection. On the other hand, you don't want to put it too close to the bike path because of potential conflict. So I'll just mention the developer did make some mitigation measures. They're going to put in a rumble strip on that exit, so people are warned to kind of keep it slow as they're pulling out and taking a right-hand turn lane. And they have committed to installing a flashing light similar to what we have on Maple Street at the bike path as well. So there'll be an opportunity for anyone using the path to hit that flashing light to help slow down traffic that's coming through there.
I believe, because this is not a renewal, this is a new license, and given the quantities of flammable materials, we have to hold a public hearing on this, correct? I can't say I'm 100% sure, but I'm about 85% sure.
I know it is a license that has to be issued by the town council, whether it needs to be in the form of a public hearing separate from a posted item, I
Yes.
can't answer that for certain.
They, I believe, they've had they had hearings before, I believe, when this proposal first came up.
The public hearing would be as it relates to the storage of flammable and combustible liquids, not the project as its entirety, but only to the storage of the license application.
Sure.
And I'm almost sure that because it's a new one, it's not a renewal, that we have to hold a public hearing. But I can't say with 100% certainty, and I didn't have time to look it up today.
What I am aware of, and town clerk can jump in as well, is that issuance of approval for a new tank is within the jurisdiction of the town council as the licensing authority. Renewal of of an existing facility is done through the town clerk's office. So that may be the distinction that you're calling attention to. I'm not sure.
That is a distinction as
Yeah.
well, but because it's a new application, I believe we have to hold, because a renewal, before it was issued, the abutters already had their chance. With a new application, I believe the abutters have to have a chance to speak to it.
Why don't we ask our town attorney?
I believe Councilor Madison's correct, where you're issuing a new license, runs with the land. I believe, although I haven't dealt with this and I haven't seen the agenda before tonight, and I apologize for that, but my recollection is that there is a requirement that there's a public hearing for comment by the public with respect to the issuance.
Okay.
So then we would table that and schedule a public hearing through the
When we do, could we have, obviously, the folks representing the project to kind of give us an overview of the installation and what their the safety features and so on, as well as the fire chief, who obviously has reviewed the plans?
Right. Will do.
Some of that information may already be contained in the planning board when they came with, at least the safety type items. And I'm not sure, but I would assume-
Typically, no.
No.
Typically
That's a
more
site and
detailed.
design, they don't get into the,
So the applicant as well as the fire marshal, fire chief.
right.
I wonder if Belcher's aware that there has to be a public meeting regarding the topic you're speaking.
Yeah, there is I don't, town attorney seems to feel as though I'm right too, but there is a small chance I'm wrong, but I know I've been through it before, but it was many years ago, and I'm 85% sure we do have to hold a public hearing on it.
But normally, most hearings where you're issuing a license for the first time for the storage of flammables, the licensing authority generally asks the property owner or the applicant to come in and explain how the operation is going to work, what materials they're using, or any questions that they may have, and to be available if anyone in the audience has any questions, so you understand.
Is Attorney Shields representing that project?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
So probably the first place to look on that is 527 CMR, I think is where you're going to find the answer to it.
All right. So, with that being said, we'll table that item, and all we have left are the two executive session items. So I'd like to propose a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters of non-union compensation, and to return to open session only to adjourn.
No, because we may have to take action to vote on things in open meeting that are discussed in
True.
executive.
Okay.
And also, I just had a couple items real quick before we go into executive session, if that's all right.
Yeah, agenda items?
Well, they're just more or less announcements.
Sure.
The debt committee that we've established is meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the town accountant's office. There was a lot of interest from some council members in the past. I can't attend it, but if you want to attend it, that's where their first meeting is tomorrow. Also, I suspect all of you got the correspondence from Senator Lesser of a roundtable that they're hosting over in Long Meadow. Again, unfortunately, I'm scheduled out of town that day, and I can't attend it. I'd love to, though. But if others can attend it, I would encourage them, and I'd be very eager to hear what kind of ideas were discussed.
I wrote back to him, I told him I couldn't make it either, but I did say that if there's any type of video or transcript from that, I'd love to read it, see the comments and so
Yeah.
forth.
And I've already RSVP'd, so.
You have?
Yeah.
Good. I'm a little disappointed the notice came out a week before. I mean, it doesn't give us much time to alter our schedules, but
Well, I could be the devil's advocate and say this is the first time I heard about the debt or someone wants to call it the debt squad meeting tomorrow morning, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, they
That's
posted
14
the
hours
meeting.
notice.
They posted it.
Did they?
Yeah, that's how I found out.
Just wanna make sure.
Yep, all right.
Side note on that, committees, maybe we should talk about like what committees we want to, I had a constituent write to me saying he's also interested in joining, and, you know, I told him, well, what type of committee? Anything, I just want to help the town. So if we know what kind of anticipated committees we have or where there's openings, maybe we can, you know, get a list together, so then we can steer this person and say, well, here's what's available, and, you know, maybe send us a letter and we can discuss putting you on that committee at our next meeting.
Yeah, we know we have the, you know, search committee coming up for the permanent town manager. Collins Center is gonna officially post that position, you know, soon.
Yeah?
So that, you know, that committee will be necessary
All right,
sooner than
I got-
later. It's
I
gonna
can
come quick.
suggest you know, to that, sure.
I have had some interest, too. I've had some phone calls on people that are interested in working on that screening committee, so.
Very good.
So we should definitely make that an action item, agenda item for one of our next meetings.
Okay, so you want to remake your motion, Paul? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay, because I got a little change anyways. So I'd like to propose a motion to go into executive session to discuss non-union contract negotiations and strategy relating to potential litigation to return to open session.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
We'll do the individual votes.
Yeah, I'm doing that right
Okay.
now. Counselor Anderson?
Aye.
Counselor Madison?
Aye.
Counselor Federici, yes. Counselor Ford?
Aye.
Counselor Kane?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to propose a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.